Hi, my name is Leilani, and in this video I'm going to be talking about assumptions in academics. And today, because this is a pretty big one, I want to be specifically addressing this one topic, which you already know it is because it was in the title and all the things. But right now, I want you to click like if this is something that you're interested in, and let me know down in the comments below if you want me to explore other assumptions. In fact, if you have an assumption that you think that we can kind of examine and look at, let me know in the comments down below. And so let me get started. Progress of a student's learning is measured exclusively with test scores and grades. But let's really examine those test scores. So first of all, I think all of us would pretty much agree that a student's progress in life should never be determined by test scores and grades, period. In fact, their academic achievement probably should not be determined by test scores and grades. In fact, to add to that, there have been so many studies within public school environment, within educational colleges that have shown that this is not to be the case. However, we still hang on to this idea that a student's progress is determined by test scores and grades. And one way this is shown is through colleges. Colleges want to get transcripts and colleges want to get test scores. And they look at those things to kind of decide whether or not they want to accept a child into their program based on those things. Now, they may ask for an essay as well and do an interview, but really the test scores and the transcripts are huge. Now, we can talk a lot about having a bad day, learning disabilities, maybe they're not strong in that area because all kids have different gifts and talents, is stronger in one area, not stronger in another. But I want to talk about social Darwinism. I'm going to talk about social Darwinism. So in social Darwinism, it's this idea that we're going to be sorting through different kids. And within the Educational Institute, this has been established when we're looking at test scores and grades to sort through different kids. Like, you can go here, you can go here. We're sorting them out, pulling out the weak and building up the strong. You see that? And even though I know a lot of us, because you're watching this channel, I know a lot of us were like, I disagree with that. But I guarantee that when your kid, I shouldn't guarantee, but a lot of you, when your kid reaches high school and they want to go to college, you're looking at those test scores. But first, I want to talk about some studies out there that have shown that a student's academic ability should not be determined by their grades and test scores. So there's one in the US study. It was titled Parents, this one's 2018, Going Beyond Good Grades. It's by a nonprofit Learning Heroes. It says that there is a disconnect between grades and report cards and actual academic achievements. So another study found that grades and academic achievements does not determine the success in an individual as they grow into adulthood. Tests and grades only predict how a student will do on future tests and grades. And I love that. I'm going to go ahead and put those sites down in the description box below if you want to go a little bit more in depth on your personal studies into those. So as I went through all this long list of all these studies, and there's a long list out there, guys, of all these studies showing these things, I still realize that we find so much value as parents and rely so heavily on using these tools to determine our children's overall academic achievement and their value. That's another thing. We put so much value in these test scores to determine the future of our child's success. So I'm going to give an example of myself right now when I was in 7th grade. Okay, so when I was in 7th grade, I absolutely loved math. I loved my math class, and it's just something I enjoyed. It was doing math was kind of stress relief for me, all the things. Loved it. So I was petrified to find out that my teacher approached the class and said that they needed to start weeding people out. Social Darwinism. They had to weed some of us out because they only had enough room for a certain amount of people to move up to the above average class. Now, I loved the challenge in math, and of course I was really stressed out about this too. And he also said to us if we missed that day of school, that we would automatically put in the average class because they just weren't going to redo the test. So, needless to say, I got sick on the day of the exam and I went to school with a fever. And I knew that I had to push through and do the best I could because I really wanted to be in that above average class. Now, needless to say, I did not make the cut at all. I was very close, but I didn't make the cut. And I was absolutely devastated. I felt like a failure. Of course, I didn't even take in the fact that I was sick. I still blame myself. And for years and years and years, I decided mentally I was awful at math and I'd been lying to myself. And it was very hard mentally. But I took so much value in that test that it was determining who I was as a person. I took it very personally, actually. And how many of our kids are feeling the same exact way, that we put so much value in a test, whether they're going to the public school, private school, or homeschool? I think because us as parents, back in the day when we were in school, there was so much emphasis placed on test. The same is true when you look at those ACTs and those SATs. How many kids really, really stress out because you do have a limited amount of time you can take it. I know there's a lot of, but you only have so many years, right? You have to get certain scores to make it into certain colleges. It's very stressful. I even remember when I was in high school, we would rank ourselves according to scores, and there would be sheets of paper with lists on them, with names on them, with rankings on them, and it was just so devastating because for some reason, we thought this is going to determine our future. And how many of us still hold on to those? I still remember the number that I had with the SAT scores where I ranked in the school. I still remember my ranking in general when it came to my GPA. And that number sticks with me because I, in my head, thought I wasn't smart enough to do certain things that I was passionate about. Now, when it comes down to things, academic achievement, future, our jobs in the future, how successful we are going to be at life, you could take, and we all know this, right? But do we walk this? Do we teach this to our kids? You can take a person that is a genius in this specific subject, but if they're lazy and they're a procrastinator and they're argumentative, are they going to be as successful as a person that has a passion for the subject, that is mediocre, but they have integrity and they're willing to learn and they're easy to work with? Who is going to be more successful in the end? We all know the answer is going to be this person. But when we put those pressures on students at such a young age, it really prevents the person that can really blossom in that field to blossom. Now, it's good to keep them challenged, and it is good to keep them humble, but there are definitely other ways that can happen. I also want to mention, and we all agree, when somebody's sick, when there's a learning disability that follows them, dyslexia and dysgraphia and those learning disabilities when it comes to test taking, really, especially because, so much emphasis is placed on these tests to get into colleges. We could talk about bad days. People have bad days. There can be situations in a child's home. For example, it wasn't tests, but I remember that I had a big project that was due, and the night before my mom passed away. Do you think I did well on that project? Now, there may be other situations in the home that, for example, there may be a divorce, there may be trauma, there may be parents that are ill with cancer or life-threatening diseases, siblings that are ill, there may be just all these different things that can affect a child during a test on that day. The brain is not there. They probably don't even care, to be honest. So why are we putting so much value in a test that happens once? Now I'm going to talk about grades briefly. And grades are usually determined by a person. Now, there are situations where a child in the public school setting where they walk into a class and the person that's teaching the class, their learning style does not jive and it doesn't work and they're not going to score well. Same is true within the homeschool environment. There may be a subject that from a book or a curriculum that doesn't quite jive for them and is not working too well. Now, in a homeschool situation, we, the parent, probably would change out the curriculum. So, that's one benefit of being homeschooled. Maybe the child is not ready for that particular subject. Because we all develop differently, and it is totally okay if you develop later in a certain area. Academically, intellectually, it does happen. It doesn't mean that in that moment, if you can't do it, it doesn't mean that you're stupid. And a lot of us, because they can't make the cut or make the grade, we think that automatically. How many of us, may have been, this is me included, when I was in high school, I was not a great writer. I was not. I had a hard time with writing. I wasn't very passionate about it, and I had a hard time understanding certain concepts. However, now, I love that kind of stuff. I love writing. I love writing books. However, from that experience back in high school, sometimes that haunts me. All it means is I just wasn't developmentally ready for that level of writing that I was pushed into. Here's the thing that we have to think about. In the educational system, for whatever reason, however it was done, there were certain benchmarks put into place to weed people out and to also find certain people that certain people were looking for in the educational institute. And those people would shine and outshine the others. And all those other people that were quote unquote weeded out, what's happening to them? They don't matter anymore. That's kind of, I'm being blunt, okay? And they, their self-esteem would be hindered, motivation would be hindered. Why? We know that's wrong. But it's good to look at the truth and the motivation and the history behind things, because then it really points out your error of thinking. Why do I still believe that? Why do I still believe that to be true? Just think about that a little bit. Now, as a side note, I will say that testing within and of itself in context is good. Not nationally normed, not social Darwinism. Let's say, for example, Charlotte Mason does testing, so to speak. So you read a passage, for example, in the Charlotte Mason method, right? You read a passage and then you ask your child to tell you what it was about. That is a form of testing. They're regurgitating information that they've learned. Same is true in math. You just did a lesson on something. Now you're going to test to see if that knowledge was retained. If it's not retained, that means you need to go back and fix that a little bit. If it is, it's time to move on. See, the problem is a lot of us have that mindset that if that information has not been retained, you're stupid, or you have a learning problem, but like in a negative way. It could be a learning disability, so we need to address that. So instead of addressing the problem, a lot of us will just label the child as something and everybody will move on to the next section. Of course, that child that goes through that, they're going to struggle with the next section because they weren't ready for that. When in fact, what we need to do is after that quote unquote testing, we need to go back and revisit those things that they did not do well in it, or the information that they did not retain. See, that is how I believe education should work and how I believe testing can be used. It's not always. So when you are placed as a parent or student in a situation where you need to take a test to meet certain requirements for your state, for homeschooling, do not put so much stock into that, where you look at that score is something that determines your child's future or labels them as successful or not successful. I hope this all made a lot of sense to you guys, and I hope it got you thinking. I am actually currently writing a book where I'm discussing these things, but I am writing it from a Christian worldview perspective, just kind of laying it out there for you guys, because I want you to think about how you, the parent, were taught. Whether you were raised in a private school or public school, even homeschooling. Are you thinking biblically minded or secular minded? And that's what the book that I'm writing is about. I do have a book that I came out with last year called Freedom to Learn. It's all about encouragement. It's kind of a beginner's 101, but there's some really cool stories in there. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave me some comments. I want to know what you're thinking, and let me know if you have any assumptions. Like I said before, give me a thumbs up, share, all those things. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!